I suppose questions that I want to ask, probably I would like to get answers from all three organisations. First of all, to the Department and to indeed CTEC and Turas Nua. Would you agree that the introduction of JobPath and the allocating of this work to both companies came as a result, not specifically to those companies, but this type of dealing with unemployment came as a result of pressure from the Troika when we were in trouble in 2011? Because when you look back on the figures, the unemployment rates from 2011 up to now are quite different, and clearly that relates to a growth in the economy, where the thing is presented as the long-term unemployed, there's a problem with them. They're the problem, not the economy. And I find it incredible that we would put across a scenario that there's a problem inherent in being unemployed rather than a problem with the economy, with the collapse of the banking and financial sector and austerity and cuts that ensued from it. So I'd like you to comment on the role of the Troika in pressurising us to bring in this model, and that's particularly for the people from the Department. On the question of the signing...
I'll get an answer. Do you want Mr McKeown to answer that?
Oh, I thought we were asking all our questions in 10 minutes.
No, you can. When he answers, you can ask the next one.
Okay.
To make sure you get replies as you're going along. Right. Mr McKeown.
The Troika was absolutely very keen and very interested that we do this. They're also very keen and very interested that we do other things which are the right and proper thing to do. The NESC, National Economic and Social Council, produced a report, I believe it was 2010-2011, on job seeker and employment support for job seekers. It suggested that we develop a contracting model independently of the Troika. The issue we have is that we simply didn't have enough case officers to deal with people who are unemployed. We simply didn't. We had to resort it. Whether the Troika was telling us to or not, I think we would have done it. The fact they were interested in us doing it and held us to account in terms of what are your plans, when will they be produced. You know, you can argue, you know, in terms of different people with different views of the Troika, but certainly I think it was the right thing to do. We would have wanted to do it anyway. Can I just talk about the... Can
you explain to me then why in 2011 there were 359 sanctions against welfare recipients as against 16,451 in 2017? If it's all about reducing unemployment, why the massive increase in sanctions when we've got more and more people at work?
And I'll deal with that, Deputy, as well as your question about the long-term unemployed. Do people think there's a problem inherent in them? Let me absolutely, this department, the people I work with, the staff I work with, do not think that. I want to be absolutely clear about that. There is people who are long-term unemployed face greater challenges breaking out of unemployment. The statistics are very clear. You know, the longer you're unemployed, your chances of securing employment in the next 12 months diminish, you know, down to low single digits in terms of percentage likelihood of your 3 years or more unemployed, down to about 8% or less. Now, that's a huge challenge to my department to deal with job seekers. They require intensive support, intensive case officer support, and that's what this is about. We don't believe we're doing it because there's something wrong with them.
Can you explain the sanctions?
The sanctions, I think, are related to two things. First of all, we only introduced them, if memory serves me right, 2010-2011. I need to get the exact date, so it was only a new thing at that time, and like all new things, it takes time.
2011 is 6 years ago, and there's been a massive increase.
Oh, there has been, but what I'm saying is you're comparing the 2011 figure to figures since. So
well, yeah, but that's fair enough. If you introduced in 2011, there was 359 at the height of chronic unemployment in the country, and last year, when we're nearly out of unemployment crisis, it's 16,451.
And the main reason for that, Deputy, is in 2011 we weren't engaging with people at the rate that we should have been engaging with them, either in the intro service or through JobPath or with the local employment services. As I said earlier, we had caseloads of more than 1,000 job seekers for every case officer. Where we've now got caseloads of 120 to 200 to 1 on average, it's actually about 200 on average across all services. We're now engaging with people more intensely. That more active engagement.
You did say that in your introduction, but I would contend that that increase in sanctions shows that this is about sanctioning the unemployed rather than helping, particularly when we've got a high level of employment.
I definitely, genuinely, and I think if you look at the numbers, the numbers are about, and I don't have them in front of me, but there's about 0.6% of job seekers that are being managed at any point in time are on a penalty rate of payment. About 0.6%. It's a very low number. And at this committee before and at the Public Accounts Committee, I cautioned, because I understand the concerns. I hear them. As I said, I get a lot of these calls myself, just as you do. I hear the concerns. But we've got to be careful about, and I'm not suggesting you're doing it, but we've got to be careful about creating a narrative that it's widespread, that it's everywhere,
okay, well
because
then,
it isn't.
I am careful, but listen to me. Here's clients that have come to me that I think the system is not careful with. A Syrian man who has attained residency here with very poor English has been told to attend a course on medical devices and has to travel from outside of Blanchardstown, the far side of Blanchardstown, to Sandyford every day, 3 hours each way, and he's struggling really hard with the course because his English is poor. How is that putting him at the centre of what you're attempting to do, all three of you? How is that putting the client at the centre and attempting to help him? That to me is penalising that man, and if he didn't do it, his welfare would be slashed.
Well, yeah. Well, maybe Deputy can go back on that. I mean, I don't comment on any individual case. I don't know the detail of that case, Deputy. It may very well be, I'm not saying it is, it may very well be a very positive intervention for that gentleman if he can do it. It may well be, and it may well have good prospects of employment at the end of it. I don't know that, so I can't comment on it. What I would say is the only people, and I'd repeat this, the only people who can decide on a reduced rate of payment are the department's deciding officers. They look at every case, they will call that man in and they'll talk to him, and if he can prove to them that this is an unreasonable request but he's still interested in doing other things, it's very unlikely a reduced rate of payment will be applied. Well, it is an
unreasonable request, I think, in anybody's book, particularly given his poor language skills. And I just want to finish by asking you, are you at all concerned that the companies, particularly CTEC, who are running the Job Pat scheme, may ultimately head down the road of Daniel Blake, where in Britain 1 million people on disability allowance have been brought into their remit, and the Department of Health have already proven that over 110,000 of them actually cannot work at all. Are you concerned, for example, that people in direct provision will be brought into Job Path purely because they can't get out of the direct provision centres and can't get work? Have you any concerns about the direction that this is taken, and that the reports that come from Britain, where workers in the system are saying that they have had homeless people before them who they have to keep penalising because they don't show up because of their chaotic lives for interviews, or they don't sign documents, and they're living in starvation, where workers are saying they get brownie points for cruelty? That's how they put it. Are you concerned at all that that may happen here?
And I'll deal with that, Deputy. I mean, the only people who can change what the Job Path providers do, or the local employment services do, or the community employment services does, is the department and the government. Any move down that route. Just to talk about Daniel Blake, and you raised it, I mean, the instances used there and the examples you quoted are actually examples where the Department of Work and Pensions own staff. The Department of Work and Pensions Job Centre plus staff engaged with the job seeker and the people with disabilities. It wasn't contractors, it was the department's own staff. The second point is that it was of people with disabilities. We don't refer anybody with disabilities to Job Path, local employment services. We don't. We have a separate regime called the employability companies, and we deal with those employability companies. Sorry, that's a policy decision for the future. I can't say we won't, but it's not.
It's a possible policy position for the future. Well, seeing how it happened in Britain and Europe and all, wouldn't it be sort of, would the Troika or Europe be saying, now be good boys here in Ireland and take people with disabilities into this?
If I can give you why I don't think it will happen, is we have a completely different approach to welfare. Our welfare payments are much higher than they are in the United Kingdom. The approach we take with Job Path, for example, a measure of a sustainable job for us is 30 hours work a week for at least 13 weeks. In the United Kingdom, it's 16 hours work a week for at least 4 weeks. There are things, we have our own medical assessors, we haven't contracted out medical assessment. So I think it's very, very unlikely. It's always possible. Bad things can always happen in the future. Bad policy decisions can always be made in the future. Can I say it will never happen? No. Do I think it's likely to happen? No.
Well, I will quote you back as a bad policy decision if it's ever taken, that you said it. One last question for the companies, please. Briefly. And that is, are you concerned at all of the type of jobs that people are going into from the operation of CTAC and Tourist Nua? In other words, you quote here in your presentation a lot about catering and the hotel industry and what we call it, the hospitality industry. There's been report after report lately that show that these are the lowest paid workers in the country, that the rate of poverty among about, I think the Social Justice Ireland recent report was about a quarter of this cohort of workers, who are also receiving state benefits like FIS because they're on such poor pay, are actually living in poverty. And there's also the increase of working people in homeless accommodation because they can't afford rents. Is this organisational model of both CTEC, Tourist Nua and the department working together to create this job pat scheme concerned about the type of low-paid, precarious and often bogus self-employment jobs that people are pushed into? Because if they don't take them, they're penalised.
Thank you, Deputy. I want to try and get an answer.
One comment. You keep saying the Safe Pass, the Safe Pass, the Safe Pass as an example of what you do to train people. Can you go beyond the Safe Pass and say what else? List a few more examples of decent training that people get.
Thank you, Deputy. We'll try and get Mr Donnery or Ms Moss, whichever wants to start.
Just in terms of the types of jobs we place people into, so effectively we've had almost 19,000 people placed into jobs in more or less every sector in the economy, from construction, you mentioned hospitality, call centre, sales, but we place people into very high-paying jobs as well. I suppose it hasn't been just low-paying people that have been long-term unemployed. In terms of long-term training, so for instance, we would work with educational training boards where we can put people into long-term training, and we have what's called stop the clock. So the person can go into training for up to 6 months and then can come back to us and work with us. They may find a job while they're actually in that training, or they can come back to us and we can work with them for the I suppose the duration. But ultimately, getting back to the precarious jobs, again, there's no point in us putting people into precarious jobs. Ultimately, we need to sustain people in jobs. That's the way JobPad is set up, and that's what we endeavour to do, built on what I suppose what the job seekers' skills, traits and abilities. We try and build on them, and ultimately, the longer they sustain in jobs, the better for us. Our own systems show us the longer we work with people, the longer they actually sustain in jobs.
Thank you very much. Mr Milne.
Yes. In relation to the type of jobs, our starting point is to discuss the job goals with the client. The clients tell us the two principal areas that they would like to get employment in, and that's the starting point for us. And some of that's informed in terms of work they've done previously or work they want to do. So that's client driven. In relation to other types of training, commercial driving is an example of another area we've procured training for people. There's about 8,000 clients that have gained training through ETBs or other state-funded training, and we're always looking for the best route way for the client in order for them to pursue their goals. And in some cases, clients will come to us with barriers such as poor English or poor reading and writing, and we'll engage with the services provided and seek to signpost them into routeways where they can help overcome some of those challenges that they have from their own perspective.
Mr McKeown.
Just one thing to add to that, Deputy, you mentioned about bogus self-employment and so on, and precarious employment. I think it's important. We're very conscious of that in designing the contract. We had a look at what happened in other countries, and we were determined it wouldn't happen here. So it is 30 hours per week in a paid job. It's not self-employment. You have to have an employer. The employer has to be submitting to P35, 30 hours a week for at least, so it's full-time, and it's at least for 13 weeks. So it doesn't meet the kind of things of it's self-employment or it's precarious or it's not permanent. It has to be. We designed that into the contract. So we're very careful about that. I mean, we're very aware of the flaws there are in the UK model. We're very aware of the flaws where in other country models, and some states in the United States have very good models, others have very weak models. In Australia, there's somewhere it's better than the UK, but I'd argue not as good as we've got in Ireland. So we were very careful to take that all into account. And we did a lot of research, and we involved a lot of people in advising us on this. So I think we've done our best to mitigate that. If the wider economy is heading down towards a situation where more people require family income supplement or whatever, that's a separate question if you want. It's a question in terms of budget policy and so on, rather than, to be fair, the job path providers can't do anything about that.
Thank you, Mr McKeown.
No, the pay levels don't concern.
Deputy Smith, you've had your turn. We come back.
They have to be above the minimum wage, obviously, so they have to be.
Senator Conway-Watt.
Thank you very much.